that they can't even take a bath because there's no water flowing out of their faucets.
8 areas will experience daily service interruptions due to raw water quality issue, according to Maynilad. They extended the daily interruptions to July 31st due to the presence of algal blooms in Laguna Lake, where water treatments in southern Manila get their water supply.
The last time na talagang naapektuhan tayo ng algal bloom was in year 2019. Pero ang nangyari kasi this year, mas mataas yung level ng concentration.
Maynilad says they're prioritizing water quality over quantity of supply to ensure the safety of their customers.
Right now, we're operating our reverse osmosis process at full capacity. Unfortunate consequence lang nito is mas mababa din yung water production.
Maynilad adds, despite high demand of water due to supply shortage, there will be no increase in customers' monthly bill.
We are actually currently constructing a third treatment plant sa Banda po, Barangay Poblacion, Muntinlupa ito. Magsisilbi siya na buffer stock. Itong pangatlong treatment plant na ito, yung magpo-produce ng pandugtong.
Metropolitan Water Works and Sewerage System or MWSS coordinated with Maynilad to fast-track measures, most especially to the Putatan Water Treatment Plant, which is now producing 240 million liters per day versus its actual production capacity of up to 300 million liters daily.
So ang instruction is to coordinate with every barangay so that the people will know what is the actual situation. So ang importante, hindi mag-aantay yung mga tao doon sa tankers.
Stanley Gaete, CNN Philippines.
Now on to power rates. A big increase in electricity bills looms as the Supreme Court sides with Meralco and the Energy Regulatory Commission to push through with a rate hike initially scheduled in 2013. How soon will consumers see higher charges? Our Melissa Lopez has the details.
Electric bills may go even higher in the coming weeks after Meralco won a 2013 case that allows the power distributor to collect 22.64 billion pesos from its customers. That translates to an increase of over 4 pesos per kilowatt hour. Supreme Court justices voted 6-5 in August last year to uphold the decision of the Energy Regulatory Commission or ERC for Meralco to recover what it spent on more expensive electricity in December 2013. The court published the decision only on July 1st. Meralco said then that it had to buy from costlier power sources following the shutdown of the Malampaya natural gas plant. ERC approved Meralco's request to stagger the collection in 3 months. But the groups Bayan Muna and the National Association of Electricity Consumers for Reforms or NASICOR sued Meralco and ERC before the Supreme Court. Magistrates have ruled that the ERC actually protected consumers when it allowed the 3-part collection of the higher fees, easing the strain on their pockets. But petitioners say the SC ruling was unjust and ill-timed.
Itong bagong Korte Suprema, wala ba silang nakitang kababalaghan? Bakit inaprubahan ng ERC ng ura-urada ng mabilis pa sa alas 4 ang pinakamataas na dagdag singil ng kuryente ng Meralco? Kaya magfa-file talaga kami ng motion for reconsideration dito para matuloy ang laban.
Meralco says the increase won't be imposed on July electric bills as they await ERC guidelines. NASICOR says authorities have the option for staggered collection or offset the 22.6 billion pesos from Meralco's mandatory customer refunds now worth 40 billion pesos.
Maraming option dyan na hindi maging mabigat ito sa consumers. But of course, hindi natin kalilimutan na hindi naman agad natin tinatanggap yung decision ng Supreme Court. It's sad that it comes at a time when people are suffering from high cost of prices, not only of the fuel, but also of electricity bills and other prime commodities.
In her dissenting opinion, Supreme Court Justice Amy Lazaro Javier says the ERC was, in her words, unreasonable for letting Meralco dictate power rates without public consultation. Melissa Lopez, CNN Philippines.
The air transport sector is optimistic about the new leadership in the Transportation Department. Airlines are looking at improvements in airport facilities as they try to provide low-cost flights to the public amid a number of challenges. Our George Quiles has that story.
Still reeling from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, the airline industry now face more problems. Rising fuel cost and a weakening peso. But slowly, airlines are recovering, targeting to return to 100% pre-pandemic operations in the coming months.
We pay for fuel in dollars. The aircraft are paid for in dollars. Most of our maintenance expenses are in dollars. No? So we have that imbalance at the moment, and a weakening peso is certainly not ideal for us. We do need the international network to ramp up, and I think just as a matter of managing yung liquidity namin, we're holding on to a larger proportion of our cash in dollars at the moment.
The airline fuel surcharge is now at level 11, which means additional costs for passengers. That's 355 to 1,038 pesos for domestic flights and 1,172 to 8,714 pesos for international flights. Despite these problems, airlines vow to continue offering lower fares through promos. Cebu Pacific claims its fares this July are still lower by 9% compared to its July 2019 fares.
We continue to guarantee offering the lowest fares as we also continue rebuilding or restoring the flights that we are operating compared to the pre-pandemic times.
Airlines are also optimistic that the new leadership in the Transportation Department will continue supporting the industry through infrastructure projects and airport developments, which will make travel experience more convenient and safe. Transportation Secretary Jaime Bautista was a longtime president of Philippine Airlines before joining the government.
Alam naman ni Secretary Bautista yung challenges and of course yung mga highlights din sa air transport industry, particularly improving our airports, runways, yung mga facilities natin sa airports. And these things, all these things po, kaisa po ang AirAsia dyan.
With COVID-19 cases rising again, airlines expressed their preparedness to ensure the safety of passengers. But they are also hoping for more streamlined and simplified requirements for traveling under a pandemic condition. George Cahiles, CNN Philippines.
The World Health Organization is closely watching another potential Omicron subvariant. The subvariant, unofficially called BA.2.75, has been detected in India and about 10 other countries. The WHO says not much is known about severity and impact on vaccines yet.
Too early to know if this subvariant has properties of additional immune evasion or indeed of being more clinically severe. We don't know that. Luckily, the other subvariants of Omicron have not proven to be more severe. They've all been more or less like the original Omicron. So we have to wait and see.
The WHO notes vaccines are still 80 to 85% effective against severe infection. Now, a day after reporting more infections of highly contagious subvariants, the health department points out most Omicron cases are only mild to moderate. 43 more people have tested positive for the BA.5 and 20 for the BA.2.12.1 subvariant. The DOH also confirming 7 more BA.4 cases on Tuesday. Total Omicron infections are now at over 7,900. Global headlines now. The gunman in the deadly July 4th parade in the U.S. state of Illinois has been charged with 7 counts of first-degree murder. Authorities say suspect Robert E. Crimo could face a mandatory life sentence if convicted. Crimo has been in police custody after fatally shooting 7 people in Highland Park on Monday. In China, an anonymous hacker claims to have stolen the personal information of up to 1 billion Chinese nationals in what could be one of the biggest data breaches in history. An online database collated by the Shanghai police was left unsecured since April 2021. The hacker was reportedly selling names, addresses, mobile numbers, national ID numbers, ages and birthplaces, and phone call records. Coming up on Newsnight, the finance chief clarifies an earlier statement made by President Marcos where the chief executive downplayed the latest inflation report. Rex Amicio explains live. And this K-pop girl group will finally be back in your area after almost 2 years. You're watching CNN Philippines. Welcome back. Finance Secretary Ben Diokno clarifies President Bongbong Marcos' statement on the inflation report for June. Inflation is the rate in which prices of goods and services rise. Our correspondent Rex Remigio reports to us live from Malacanang in Manila. Rex, what did Diokno say about the president's remarks?
Well, Diokno is saying that President Marcos's remark about inflation was just misunderstood. He is explaining that President Marcos was referring to the full-year inflation, and the average inflation rate from January to June is at 4.4%. The finance secretary explains that's what the president was thinking about when he was asked for his reaction on the reported 6.1% inflation rate for June. The economic team, meanwhile, also revealed its economic outlook and plans to temper rising prices. This includes continuing the 6,500 peso fuel subsidy for public transport drivers and operators. The former Bangko Sentral governor says other countries are also experiencing high inflation now. Another strategy to contain prices is to continue importing goods that the country lacks. President Marcos said yesterday that he wants to import more pork and chicken as demand rises. Diokno cited Bangko Sentral forecasting inflation rate to hover at 5% for the rest of the year. This will go down to 4.2% by next year and 3.3% at 2024. That's within the government's target range of 2 to 4% inflation rate. The BSP is also projecting the economy to grow by 6.5 to 7.5% for this year and 6.5 to 8% for 2024. This could be the highest economic growth rate in Southeast Asia, including Japan, South Korea, and China. They are also aiming to lower the poverty incidence rate to just 9% by the time President Marcos steps down from office. It was pegged at 23.7% last year, mainly due to the pandemic. Diokno is also saying that the public should expect more economic plans and programs from President Marcos that he will announce during his State of the Nation address before July ends. Back to you, Pia.
Rex, what did the palace say about this proposal by lawmaker to change the name of the NAIA, the Ninoy Aquino International Airport, to the Ferdinand E. Marcos International Airport?
No comment. Press Secretary Trixie Angeles is saying that the bill was not filed by Malacanang anyway. Let's listen in.
Filed. After all, wala pang first reading. So any reaction would be premature, if any is even warranted at this time.
Negros Oriental Congressman Arnulfo Teves is saying that it's high time to replace the name of NAIA since the Manila International Airport was built during the time of the late Ferdinand E. Marcos. But critics are saying that the premise of the bill was wrong since it was already finished a decade before the elder Marcos assumes the presidency. Back to you, Pia.
Rex and Remigio there reporting. Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo sits down with Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi to discuss the way forward for Philippine-China ties. Tristan Odalo gives us a rundown of what transpired in that meeting.
China is confident that the Philippine-China relations will prosper and will reach a golden era under the administration of President Bongbong Marcos. In his bilateral meeting with Foreign Affairs Secretary Enrique Manalo, Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi says that he is hopeful that President Marcos will stay true to its commitment of having a friendly policy towards Beijing.
Wang also recalled Marcos's statement calling Beijing our strongest partner in terms of economic recovery. The Chinese official arrived at the Foreign Affairs Department Wednesday morning, where he was personally welcomed by DFA Secretary Manalo. After signing the DFA guest book, Manalo and Wang held a bilateral meeting.
Our countries and region has become more complex as political, economic, and social-cultural landscapes continually shift. China has been a good friend and close partner of the Philippines in our recovery efforts, and we have stood shoulder to shoulder in times of great difficulty, helping one another so that we may both bring progress to our people and nations.
After President Marcos was elected, the China-Philippine relations has turned a new page. We appreciate Marcos's commitment to his friendly policy towards China, and we expect highly of these recent statements that sent positive signals to the outside world. I am confident that we can open up a golden era for our bilateral relations.
After the meeting, the two officials led the ceremonial turnover of the Davao City Samul Bridge project funded by the Chinese government and a flagship project under the Build program of the Duterte administration. An agreement was also signed between the Philippine Stock Exchange and Bank of China to provide easier access to potential investors and establish a Philippine-China trading link. In a previous statement, President Marcos said the relations between Beijing and Manila should go beyond the issue on the West Philippine Sea.
We have many proposals to them in the sense that, as I said, we would like for us to increase the scope. Let's do other things too, and that way it will normalize our relationship.
There were no mentions on how the two countries will solve the dispute in the South China Sea and if whether or not the Philippines and China will enter another round of discussion on possible joint oil and gas exploration in the West Philippine Sea. Tristan Nodalo, CNN Philippines.
Well, President Marcos met with Wang, but details on the exchange have yet to be released. The Chinese foreign minister also had a separate meeting with Vice President Sara Duterte. Another batch of Marcos appointees took their oath Tuesday. Marcos's second cousin, Jose Manuel Babe Romualdez, stays as the country's ambassador to the United States. Romualdez was appointed to the post by former President Duterte in 2017. Veteran actor Tirso Cruz III is the new chairperson of the Film Development Council of the Philippines, while actor Johnny Revilla was reappointed as board member of the Movie and Television Review and Classification Board, or MTRCB. Mark Lapid, meanwhile, stays as the Chief Operating Officer of the Tourism Infrastructure and Enterprise Zone Authority. Other appointees who were sworn in yesterday are now flashed, their names and faces now flashed on your screens. Social Welfare Secretary Erwin Tulfo extends the term of 19,000 contractual service workers in the agency until December. Tulfo says some of these workers were only supposed to be with the DSWD until this month. The new secretary notes President Marcos is against cutting back on the government's workforce.
Ang sinasabi niya lang, ma'am, look other ways or means. Kung may mga savings, then we continue to not fire people. Rather, wag naman tayo mag-hire.
The Senate supermajority takes more shape ahead of the opening of the 19th Congress on July 25th. Senator Mig Zubiri, who is poised to become Senate President, met several of his colleagues today. These include Lauren Legarda, Win Gatchalian, Robin Padilla, J.V. Ejercito, and Jinggoy Estrada. Just yesterday, Zubiri had lunch with Cynthia Villar-Block.
It's safe to say na we have solidified the supermajority of the Senate. Hindi magiging rubber stamp ang Senado.
Zubiri says Senator Francis Tolentino will be chairman of the Blue Ribbon Committee. Senator Alan Peter Cayetano earlier said he will join the majority only if he becomes the Blue Ribbon chairman. Zubiri plans to meet with the Cayetano siblings, Alan and Pia, this week to convince them to be part of the supermajority. Senator Amy Marcos could soon chair 4 committees, including foreign relations, cooperatives, social justice, and electoral reforms. That is the most number of committee chairmanships granted to any senator in the 19th Congress. Meanwhile, several senators are against the new proposal at the House of Representatives, which seeks to extend the terms of the president and vice president.
The first year of our Congress, 19th Congress, I think ang usapin natin should revolve around paano natin buhayin muli ang ekonomiya.
With this, what's happening in our country in regards to inflation, in regards to increasing prices of oil, may food security issue tayo. We should focus on these issues at hand.
Over to the House of Representatives, more than 50 first-time lawmakers complete a crash course on legislative work. Lawmakers took part in a simulated session to learn proper decorum at the plenary. They got tips on delivering privilege speeches and interjecting on the floor when they want to raise an important matter. Ilocos Norte Representative Sandro Marcos and Quezon City Congressman PM Vargas absent during today's commencement rites. The presidential son was with his father during a meeting with health officials in Malacanang. More stories ahead. The phrase finally trends on Twitter after news of a long-awaited comeback from this record-breaking K-pop group. And all eyes are on this member of SB19 who performed in a digital series for the Recording Academy, which runs the Grammys. Welcome back. Will it be back-to-back wins for the country in its first matches for this year's AFF Women's Championship? We're finding out very soon with a game against Singapore at the Rizal Memorial Stadium in Manila kicking off at 7 p.m. The Filipinas are coming off a stunning win over Australia on Monday. The Philippines must be the top two of Group A to make it to the semifinals. Entertainment news now. 40 beauties gunning for a Binibining Pilipinas crown gave a preview of their pasarela or pageant walks in yesterday's pre-coronation event. Pauline Versosa has the highlights.
With less than a month left before the coronation night, all 40 candidates of this year's Binibining Pilipinas took center stage for the press presentation held here in Araneta City, Cubao, Quezon City. The candidates strutted the runway wearing swimsuits designed by veteran fashion stylist Justine Aleman. They also showcased their pasarela skills before the judges composed of pageant officials, executives, and sponsors. This year's roster of candidates are loaded with talented ladies. They're artists, models, sports enthusiasts, a pilot, and other working professionals. Now, the press presentation serves as one of the major activities ahead of the coronation night, and the candidates say they've been preparing hard to make a good impression.
I feel like I really did my best earlier and all of the hard work was really paid off. Well, to be honest, I'm a little bit nervous, but I am more excited to perform, especially on the coronation night.
Sa tinagal-tagal po namin nag-training ng pasarela, ng Q&A, konting oras lang po namin ibibigay yun sa isang stage, di ba? Kaya sobrang excited po kaming lahat. Ngayon po talagang hinahabol ko na pumayat kasi hindi na po ako nagkakanin. Galing akong only rice. Ngayon, no rice.
Former beauty queens shared what they are looking for in this pool of beauty and brains. And that includes this year's judge, Precious Lara Kigaman, who was crowned Miss International in 2005.
We are looking for beautiful Filipino women who will be able talaga to inspire and empower other young women.
Grabe, hindi tayo naubusan ng magagandang Pilipina. Dahil na-interview ko na rin ang mga ilan sa kanila at talagang na-amaze ako na every year padami yung mga Filipinas na who really wanted to join and showcase, diba, the beauty and talent of Filipinas.
The candidates are in for a busy schedule in the coming days. They will don their exquisite national costumes on July 16th and participate in the Parade of Beauties on July 23rd. And finally, they will compete for the 4 crowns at stake during the Binibining Pilipinas Grand Coronation Night on July 31st at the Smart Araneta Coliseum. Pauline Versosa, CNN Philippines.
The spotlight is on a Filipino world-class talent with Philip, also known as Ken of SB19, getting featured in the Grammys online performance series Global Spin. The P-pop artist delivered a powerful performance of his solo track Bulan. Hashtag Philip on Global Spin trended following the video's release. The series hopes to show notable artists or groups to, quote, celebrate both the creators and their home countries. Here's something K-drama fans are feeling excited about. Actor Lee Jong-suk is making his TV return after 3 years. The second teaser trailer for Big Mouth dropped today, showing the crime series star-studded cast, including Jong-suk and Girls' Generation member Im Yuna. The male K-drama star took a break from acting in 2019 for mandatory military service, then starred in the 2022 film The Witch Part 2, The Other One. Speaking of comebacks, the wait will soon be over for Blink's. Korean outlets quoted a statement from Blackpink's agency saying the K-pop phenomenon is dropping a new track next month, this after nearly 2 years without releasing music together. The Kill This Love Act will hold the, quote, largest world tour in history for a K-pop girl group by the end of the year. And that is it for now. Join me again on News.ph at 7 p.m. and on Politics as usual at 8. I'm Pia Ontiveros for Newsnight, where we go above and beyond the headlines.
A growing problem here in the Philippines. In fact, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is one of the most common reasons why people do have lung diseases. It is a leading cause of death here in the country, and those living with it are at an increased risk of a number of other conditions. Proper awareness and early detection can significantly improve the quality of life of these individuals. On the program today, we'll talk about the symptoms of the disease, its diagnosis, prevention, and of course, its treatment. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and this is MedTalk Health Talk on CNN Philippines. A big reason chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, is so common here in the Philippines is because patients often fail to receive proper care early on. Now today, our guests are here to tell us what signs to watch out for and the best treatment possible. With us is Dr. Tristan Jedaya Labitan. He is a public health specialist from the Philippine Society of Public Health. We're also joined by Dr. Percival Pangilinan. He's the section head of the pulmonary medicine at Cardinal Santos Medical Center. Now, early on, we mentioned that COPD is a leading cause of death here, as well as the entire world. But as widespread as it is preventable and it is treatable. Now, Dr. Percy, let's talk about COPD because it's not just one disease, isn't it? It's a term that describes a significant amount of diseases, actually.
It is very common, treatable, and preventable disease, which is very rampant in our population. It is sort of something which is really preventable if you are going to look at the risk factors for the development of COPD. The COPD traditionally was defined as being a spectrum of two entities, namely chronic bronchitis and emphysema. So they're at the end of both spectrum, but majority of our patients who have COPD is a mixture of both. They're somewhere in the middle.
We can think of it as a spectrum of diseases. So Dr. TJ, let's talk about that.
If you talk about COPD, the common symptoms of this develop from midlife onwards. Now, this includes breathlessness or difficulty breathing. Second is chronic cough, often with phlegm, and tiredness. And mind you, COPD during its flare, or these people with COPD during the flare find their symptoms much more worse than they require additional or extra hospital or home care. Much worse, they will be warranted to be admitted in a hospital for emergency care. Severe flare-ups in COPD can be very life-threatening.
Dr. Percy, how long does it take for some of these signs to progress, to become worse in a patient who has COPD?
You cannot answer that question without discussing one of the major risk factor for developing COPD, which is cigarette smoking. Now, it has been studied that as the number of cigarettes that you smoke increases and the number of years that you have been smoking also increases, it likely increases the possibility of someone having a COPD. Now, it has been studied that people who smoke will need to have 15 pack years of smoking before they develop symptoms of COPD.
Now, Dr. Percy, let's go back to the symptoms here para clear sa ating mga viewers, especially it can be confusing sometimes of what chronic bronchitis looks like, what someone with emphysema may look like. That's why there are some terms here. For those with chronic bronchitis, they're called the blue bloaters. Why is this so? And for those with emphysema, they're called the pink puffers.
First off, chronic bronchitis is inflammation and swelling of the inner lining of the airways of the patient with COPD. Now, with this inflammation, there is increase of sputum production or mucus secretions. And with the increase in the mucus production and the inflammation going on in the lining of the airways, this narrows down the airway caliber, producing the airway limitation or airflow limitation in patients with chronic bronchitis. The reason why they're called blue bloaters is that their oxygen level usually goes down. On the other hand, emphysema patients are called pink puffers because they are the ones who really show signs of having difficulty of breathing.
Now, Dr. TJ, let's talk about chronic bronchitis specifically here. We'll talk about the reasons why someone may be at risk for that later on in the show. But I'd like to talk about the distribution of this, males versus females, because there are some reports of higher rates of chronic bronchitis in women compared to men. Why is this so?
Our researchers are not actually sure why COPD affects women more, but this may be linked into some points, like example, the number of women who smoke is now as high as the number of men who smokes. Now, experts think that cigarette smoke may be more damaging to women's lungs. Why? Because women's lungs are smaller and their bronchial tubes are also smaller than men. So the same amount of inhaled smoke may cause more damage. Some studies show that breathing pollutants as well, given that women's lungs are much smaller and its bronchial tubes are much smaller compared to men, the same amount of inhaled pollutants may cause more damage to women.
Would you say that someone who has, say, chronic bronchitis, if left untreated, if their lifestyle does not change, that they will eventually get to the point of having emphysema?
No, there are 4 stages. Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3, and 4, mild, moderate, severe, and very severe respectively. Yung sinasabi nga kanina, will explain it, Dr. Percy, but in the Stage 1, you may have no symptoms at all for Stage 1 of COPD. For Stage 2 naman, the moderate, you might have to stop every few minutes to catch your breath. And the severe stage, that's a Stage 3, you may be too short of breath to leave the house. Even undress and undressing might require you to be breathless for Stage 3. At the Stage 4 of the very severe stage of COPD, you might have a lung or heart failure.
So similar to chronic bronchitis, it's characterized by persistent cough. There's wheezing and there's also almost always some fatigue involved. Now your doctor will likely run tests to see how well your lungs are working. And if diagnosed with emphysema, you won't be able to empty your lungs of air as quickly or as effectively as you should. What causes this airflow limitation? When we return, we'll talk about risk factors that contribute to emphysema, chronic bronchitis, and COPD in general. Now, we're your partner in healthcare. This is MedTalk Health Talk. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk, where caring is our calling. If you find yourself with these symptoms of wheezing, being fatigued, have those risk factors that we'll be discussing later, you might have chronic obstructive pulmonary disease or COPD. Now, it's a group of lung diseases that make it difficult for people to breathe. But there's another type of lung disease that also causes some form of swelling in your airways and some form of difficulty in breathing, and that is asthma, which is an extremely common condition here in the Philippines. The Department of Health reported that 1 in 10 Filipinos were suffering from asthma as of 2017. Now, Dr. Percy, let's talk about asthma for a second here. What happens to a person's lungs when they have asthma, and how does it differ from COPD?
Asthma is usually seen in the younger age group, while COPD patients usually start having their symptoms after the age of 40 years old. Another difference is the symptoms of COPD tend to be progressive. Ibig sabihin, palala lang ng palala yon. While in asthma, it's very variable. Meaning, if the patient with asthma, particularly the mild forms of asthma, if they do not have any attacks or exacerbations, they seem to be very normal with no airflow limitation and no symptoms, no wheezing, nor shortness of breath.
Now let's talk about the causes. We've been touching on some of the risk factors earlier on the show. Let's talk about the causes, the main causes of COPD here in the Philippines. Dr. TJ, can you start off on that? We already know how cigarette smoking is a big factor in COPD, but we also have other risk factors such as exposure to secondhand smoke, the kind of work the person does, even some elements in cooking can actually cause COPD. Could you talk about some of the risk factors for COPD?
Aside from smoking, though smoking can cause lung diseases, given that this is really one of the top risk factors in COPD because it destroys or it damages your airways and the small air sacs or the alveoli. Now, lung diseases caused by smoking include COPD and emphysema and chronic bronchitis, as stated earlier. Again, and also to note, cigarette smoking causes lung cancer or different kinds of cancers for that matter. If you have asthma as well, tobacco smoke can trigger an attack or can make an attack worse. Smokers are 12 to 13 times more likely to die from COPD than non-smokers. Although non-smokers are also exposed given that there is this second-hand smoking.
But Dr. TJ, another possible cause of COPD is air pollution because in 2020, the Philippines ranked actually 57th among nations with the worst air pollution. That's according to IQ Air's World Air Quality Report. Now, my question is, air pollution here in the Philippines, a lot of factors come into play here. Industrialized factories, diesel is a very common fuel used here in the Philippines, especially in big cities. How big of a factor is air pollution in causing COPD?
Naturally kasi ang function ng lungs natin is to breathe in oxygen and breathe out the unnecessary gases sa ating mga katawan. Though given the environmental factors or exposures with this air pollution and other factors at that, it is very detrimental to the health of the lungs of every individual that inhales these gases. There has been report as well that these occupational hazards, nakikita natin yan sa mga report natin, and not just COPD and even occupational asthma, kasi we've talked about asthma earlier. There is also this occupational asthma na nakikita natin, which causes, again, the wheezing, the cough, the irritation of the lungs, etc. Given that the environmental factors as well, this warrants every patient or every individual. Lahat tayo exposed, lahat tayo vulnerable because we are in one planet. That is why we should really consider taking good care of our environment kasi that also means taking care of ourselves.
Now let's go to one of the big ones, which is cigarette smoking. Dr. Percy, I know many Filipinos are aware of the bad effects of cigarettes, but I'd like to touch on something which is very common nowadays, and that is heated tobacco products, which include vape smoking, as well as other types of non-combustible ways of smoking, kumbaga. These vape products are still fairly new. The data probably isn't that comprehensive yet, unlike cigarette smoking, where we have over 60 years worth of data. What do we know now about vape? Is it a safer alternative to cigarette smoke?
So far, we have had a few studies which say that the vaping is really safer than cigarette smoking, but it will also entail the same risk factors for developing your chronic pulmonary diseases.
COPD is preventable and it is treatable. When we return, we'll talk about ways in which those diagnosed with COPD are managed and treated, and what you can do to help prevent it from happening. Your health is our mission here on MedTalk Health Talk. We'll be right back. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and welcome back to MedTalk Health Talk. Living with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, or COPD, can be overwhelming for a lot of people. But there are many ways that individuals can ease the symptoms and keep the disease from progressing. But most importantly, what we want to advocate here is prevention. Doc Percy, let's talk about some of the treatment options for someone who is initially diagnosed with COPD here in the Philippines.
It will depend on how severe their COPD is. Now, as far as medicines are concerned, the mildest form of COPD, we can do away with giving just short-acting bronchodilators as needed. Now, as you go up higher in the severity scale, we have these, what we call long-acting muscarinic antagonists in the form of inhalers. And then if that doesn't work, we go to long-acting beta-2 agonists. And for the more severe patients who seem to not respond to your previous medicines, we go for combinations of all of these things.
Now, Dr. TJ, we've been talking about ways to prevent this. Ideally, let's talk about the biggest risk factor here, which is cigarette smoke. Now, ideally, you wouldn't want to try and find something safer because cessation of smoking is the best option here. Now, my question is, for someone who is diagnosed with COPD and they take away that biggest risk factor there, could be cigarette smoking or their occupation, maibabalik ba? Babalik ba sa normal ang kanilang lung situation?
Maibabalik ba sa normal yung lung? With COPD, hindi na siya babalik sa normal. But given the staging that I stated earlier, no, mape-prevent natin ang severity of this staging of COPD with a patient. Now, if you have started smoking, from today, start to quit na. No, we have smoking cessation clinics available in our rural health units, sa ating mga rural health centers, and also in our DOH retained hospitals. There are trained individuals for you to be assisted on how you will quit smoking. And for those who have not started smoking yet, do not ever start smoking. For you to not be able to be exposed to COPD and other lung diseases. No, hindi na siya mababalik, mape-prevent lamang natin ang severe or on its severe form ang inyong COPD.
Dr. TJ, that's interesting. Could you talk a little bit more about the smoking cessation program that you have? What is the goal for someone who is addicted to nicotine? What is the goal here? Is it complete cessation, or is it replacing that habit with something that is less harmful?
Actually, the smoking cessation clinic, it's a process. No? It's not a one-time, big-time treatment for smoking cessation. The patient or the client will be assessed first and will be counseled, and they will go through a process, no series of processes for this individual to be able to really get rid of the want to smoke. So hindi siya one time, big time, and it's not a replacement of nicotine or whatsoever na sinasabi nila. So might as well, if you are a smoker, please visit the nearest DOH-retained hospitals or your nearest health centers, because these individuals are trained to conduct smoking cessation. They have smoking cessation clinics in the respective RHUs or health centers and hospitals.
Now, Dr. Percy, let's talk about how to keep someone's lungs healthy, because we're exposed not just by secondhand smoke, but so many environmental things. How can our viewers keep their lungs healthy?
One of the best ways for you to keep your lungs healthy is, of course, to avoid smoking. If you are not yet smoking, don't start. And for you to avoid being exposed to noxious particles and gases. And that's one thing that it's done nowadays because of the pandemic. We are so used to using our masks as a protection. So in itself, it has been studied that wearing the mask has decreased the likelihood of patients with COPD to be exposed to trigger factors that might exacerbate their condition. And of course, a healthy diet will benefit your lungs and your whole body as well.
And with that, thank you so much, Dr. Tristan Labitad and Dr. Percival Pangilinan, for being with us today and sharing your insights and sharing your expertise when it comes to COPD. We appreciate your time and your insights. I'm Dr. Freddy Gomez, and thank you for watching MedTalk Health Talk. We'll see you again next time.